Hi everyone, this is Teacher Rafael, and today I will be discussing about designing performance assessment tasks. Performance assessments require students to exhibit the extent of their learning through a demonstration of mastery by performing a task or by producing a product. Once learning targets have been identified and you have decided that a performance assessment is the method you want to use, 3 steps will guide you in constructing the complete performance task. The first is to identify the performance task in which students will be engaged. The second is to develop descriptions of the task and the context in which the performance is to be conducted. The third is to write the specific question, prompt, or problem the students will receive. Let's go to the first step. Identify the performance task. The performance task is what students are required to do in the performance assessment, either individually or in groups. The tasks can vary by subject or by level of complexity. For example, there are tasks specific for the course or subject algebra, and there are tasks specific for the subject physics. Some performance tasks are specific to a content area, and others integrate several subjects and skills. For example, the analysis and computational skills you learn in math can also be applied in science subjects like physics. With regard to the level of complexity, it is useful to distinguish 2 types, restricted and extended. Restricted type performance tasks target a narrowly defined skill and require relatively brief responses. They are structured and specific and require relatively little time for administration and scoring. Examples are short essay questions, reciting a poem, and interpretive exercises. On the other hand, extended type performance tasks are more complex, elaborate, and time-consuming, and requires that students use a variety of sources of information, such as observations, library, or interviews. Extended type tasks often include collaborative work with small groups of students. Products are typically developed over several days or even weeks, with opportunities for revision. Examples of extended type performance tasks include writing and performing a song and constructing a PowerPoint presentation. Step 2. Prepare the task description. The performance task needs to be specified so that it meets the criteria for good performance assessment and is clear to students. The purpose of task description is to provide a blueprint or listing of specifications to ensure that essential criteria are met, that the task is reasonable, and it will elicit desired student performance. The task description should include the following: content and skill targets to be assessed. What competencies or knowledge or skills are you trying to assess? Second is description of student activities. Is it group or individual? So are they allowed to work together, or is it an individual assignment? Next is help allowed. What types of help from others are allowed? Will they consult other experts? Then we need to consider also the resources needed. Are needed materials and resources available for students? Next is teacher role. Will you consult your students or give them ideas? Next is administrative process. What administrative procedures are required? For example, securing permission. Next is scoring procedures. Will scoring match the learning targets? Do you have the expertise needed to do the scoring? Is your scoring practical? It is essential to clearly describe the specific targets to be assessed to make certain that the activities and scoring are well matched or aligned to ensure both valid and practical assessments. Once the task description is completed and you are satisfied that the assessment will be valid and practical, you are ready to prepare the specific performance task question or prompt. Step 3. Prepare the performance task question or prompt. The actual question, problem, or prompt that you give to students will be based on the task description. It needs to be stated so that it clearly identifies what the final outcome or product is, outlines what students are allowed and encouraged to do, and explains the criteria that will be used to judge the product. A good question or prompt provides a context that helps students understand the meaningfulness and relevance of the task. For example, we have here an example of performance task and prompt adopted from Brigham Young University. The task is to design an assessment plan to monitor student progress toward learning goals. Use multiple assessment modes and approaches aligned with learning goals to assess student learning before, during, and after instruction. And describe why your assessments are appropriate for measuring learning. Here, the example prompt is provide an overview of the assessment plan. For each learning goal, include assessments used to judge student performance, format of each assessment, and adaptations of the assessments for the individual needs of students based on pre-assessment and contextual factors. The purpose of this overview is to depict the alignment between the learning goals and assessments and to show adaptations to meet the individual needs of students or contextual factors. You may use a visual organizer such as a table, outline, or other means to make your plan clear. So we can see here that the task of the student is to design or develop an assessment plan to monitor student progress towards learning goals. And the prompt here is to provide an overview of an assessment plan, which includes the assessment that will be used for student performance, its format, and then the adaptations or accommodations to be provided for the individual needs of the students. Here is another example of a prompt given the same task, adopted from Brigham Young University. So given the same task, which is to design an assessment plan, another prompt is to describe the pre and post assessments that are aligned with your learning goals. Clearly explain how you will evaluate or score pre and post assessments, including criteria you will use to decide if the student's performance meets the learning goals. Include copies of assessments, prompts, and/or student directions and criteria for judging student performance. For example, scoring rubrics, observation checklists, and rating scales. So given the same task, we can have a different prompt. So in this case, the student is to describe the pre and post assessments and show the alignment of these assessments to the learning goals set for them, for the students. So the students are required to clearly explain their pre and post assessments alignment with the learning goals. And students are also required to attach the criteria for judging student performance, such as rubrics and observation checklists or rating scales. So just remember that a good question or prompt provides a context that will help the student understand the meaningfulness and relevance of the task. Step 3 is to prepare the performance task question or prompt. Okay, so we discussed this already. Now we go to the checklist for writing performance tasks, which we will discuss one by one. So number 1, check on our checklist. Are multiple essential targets included? Structure the task to assess multiple learning targets. It is best if the task is broad and addresses both content and skill targets. Performance tasks should integrate the most essential aspects of the content being assessed with the most essential skills. For instance, students are given a task which includes different types of communication and reasoning skills in the same task. For example, students provide both a written and oral report. For just one output, the students already address 2 targets: to write a report and to present the report in class. The second item on our checklist: are multiple correct responses possible? The task should allow for multiple solutions or correct answers. Different students may take different paths in responding to the task. For example, some students may demonstrate their understanding through a song, some through a poem, and some through infographics. The possibility of multiple solutions through a properly structured performance task encourages students to personalize the process and makes it easier for the teacher to demand that students justify and explain their assumptions, planning, predictions, and other responses. The next on our list is the task authentic? There are 6 standards for judging the degree of authenticity in an assessment task, according to Wiggins, 1998. A task, according to him, is authentic if it is realistic, meaning the task replicates the ways in which a person's knowledge and abilities are tested in the real-world situations. Second, it requires judgment and innovation. The student has to use knowledge and skills wisely and effectively to solve unstructured problems, and the solution involves more than following a set of routine or procedure or plugging in the knowledge. In other words, students judge, innovate, and create performance and products to showcase their knowledge and skills. Next, an authentic assessment asks the student to do the subject. The student has to carry out exploration and work within the discipline of the subject area rather than restating what is already known or what was taught. In other words, students should not only restate or recall information, rather they should explore them. Next, authentic assessment replicates or simulates the contexts in which adults are tested in the workplace, in civic life, and in personal life. Context involves specific situations that have particular constraints, purposes, and audiences. Students need to experience what it is like to do tasks in workplace and in other real-life contexts. Next, assessment or authentic assessment assesses the student's ability to efficiently and effectively use a repertoire of knowledge and skill to negotiate complex tasks. Students should be required to integrate all knowledge and skills needed rather than to demonstrate competence or isolated knowledge and skills. For example, if we have one task covering a range of knowledge and skill targets or objectives. Next, authentic assessment allows appropriate opportunities to rehearse, practice, consult resources, and get feedback on and refine performances and products. Learning should be focused through cycles of performance, feedback, revision, performance on the production of known high quality products and standards and learning in content. In simple terms, students must be given opportunities to revise their outputs and be given feedback in order to improve their performance. Next on the list is the task feasible? Think through what students will do to be sure that the task is feasible. It should be realistic for students to implement or complete a task. Imagine what you would do if given a task. What resources would you need? How much time would you need? This depends both on your expertise and willingness and on the costs and availability of the equipment, materials, and other resources so that every student has the same opportunity to be successful. Next, is the task clearly defined? Students need to know the reason for the task. The directions should provide sufficient detail so that the students know how to proceed. Example of clearly defined task. Your assignment is to construct an original experiment that will show what causes objects to sink. Your answer should include examples that illustrate three characteristics. In demonstrating your answer, you will have 5 minutes to show different objects sinking in water, accompanied by explanations of how each characteristic is important. So we can see here in this given example that it has directions with sufficient detail as to how the students should proceed with the task. So it's given here to construct an original experiment on what causes or how objects sink. Then they are required to illustrate the three characteristics, and then they are to demonstrate their answer in 5 minutes. So they are given only 5 minutes to complete the task. And then they're going to explain how each characteristic is important. So this is an example of a clearly defined task. Next on the checklist is the task challenging and engaging, fostering perseverance. The task should be challenging and stimulating to students. This is more likely to occur when the task is something students can get excited about or can see some relevance for or importance of this task, and when the task is not too easy nor too difficult. Persistence is fostered if the task is interesting and thought-provoking. This is easier if you know your students' strengths and limitations and are familiar with what kinds of topics would motivate them. One approach is to blend what is familiar with novelty. Think of assessments which are challenging but engaging, new but interesting. Next on our checklist is the question, are the criteria for scoring shared with the task? Include explicitly stated scoring criteria. Specifying criteria helps students understand what they need to do and communicates learning priorities and the teacher's expectations. Students need to know about the criteria before beginning work on the task. For example, when oral presentation is assigned to students, we can present to them the criteria to be used in scoring their performance. Criteria such as stage presence, pronunciation, and content. Remember that when we present the task with the students, we also present together with the task the scoring criteria. For example, the rubrics, the rating sheets, or the rating scales, or the checklists that we will use in scoring or marking their performance. Next, number 8 on the list, are conditions for completing the task included? According to Boric and Tombari 2004, these following constraints or conditions must be considered when completing the task. The first is time. How much time should a learner or group of learners have to plan, revise, and finish the task? Next is reference material. What materials, such as dictionaries, textbooks, class notes, or CD-ROMs, will learners be able to consult while they are completing the assessment task? Next is other people. Will your learners be able to ask help from peers, teachers, and experts as they take a test or complete a project? Next condition is equipment. Will your learners have access to computers, calculators, spell checkers, or other aids or materials as they complete the assignment? And the last one is scoring criteria. Will you inform your learners about the explicit standards that you use to evaluate the product or performance? So these are the conditions that must be considered when completing the task. Number 9, does the task involve interaction with others? The teacher should consider whether the students will be able to interact or ask help from peers, teachers, and experts as they complete a task. Performance tasks will vary depending on your style of teaching, learning targets, students, and context. And the last on our checklist is the question, is the task biased for some students? Assessments or tasks should be fair to all students. A fair assessment is one in which students are provided equal chance or opportunities to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. Also, structure the task so that you can help students succeed. This can be done by asking questions, providing resources, and giving feedback. You could also start your task with simple ones so that they can experience success and they will be likely motivated to continue with other tasks. The key points that we have to remember are the following. The performance task defines what students are required to do. Restricted type tasks target a narrowly defined skill and have a brief response, while extended type tasks target complex tasks and have extensive responses. These may take several days or even weeks to complete. The task description needs to clearly indicate the target, student activities, resources needed, teacher role, administrative procedures, and scoring procedures. Effective tasks have multiple targets that integrate essential content and skills, are grounded in real-world contexts, rely on teacher help, are feasible, allow for multiple solutions, are clear, are challenging and stimulating, and include scoring criteria. So that ends our discussion on designing performance assessment tasks. And here are the references used for this video. These references also include the sources of the images used in this video. Thank you for watching. Hope this helps. Stay safe and healthy always. See you in my next videos.